Have you ever laid the foundation of an empire, only to realize the king sees you as mere furniture? People claim the sweetest revenge is silence. They are wrong. True revenge is pulling out the cornerstone you silently carried for years and smiling as the betrayer's proud tower crumbles to dust. When he postponed our wedding for the 5th time, I did not scream or cry. I simply stopped making miracles for him. Hello to all the wonderful listeners of Violet Revenge Stories. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Unfortunately, YouTube has recently demonetized our channel, leaving us without the budget to keep operating. If you find today's story entertaining, please consider supporting us with just $1 so the channel has the budget to pay our hardworking staff, helping them cover their living expenses and allowing them to continue creating more stories for you. You can donate easily by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen, or by clicking the PayPal link in the description or the comment section of this video. My name is Quinn Brooks. I am so sorry, Quinn, but the Horizon Tower project requires absolutely all of my bandwidth right now. We simply have to push Aspen back, Liam said, casually swirling the amber liquid in his crystal glass. That was it. That was the flimsy excuse Liam Thorne, the man celebrated as the genius architect of the Boston elite, used to cancel our wedding for the 5th time. He did not look me in the eye. He just stared at the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse, admiring a city he believed he was conquering. I did not throw my wineglass against the marble wall. I did not scream until my lungs burned, and I certainly did not drop to my knees in a puddle of pathetic tears the way I had the previous 4 times. No. A strange, absolute, and glacial calm washed over my entire body. I looked at his perfectly tailored suit and his perfectly styled hair, and in that crystalline moment of clarity, I realized I was exhausted from being the invisible scaffolding holding up his towering, fragile ego. The very next morning, the second his sleek sports car disappeared down the avenue, I went to work. I did not leave a dramatic note. Instead, I quietly made a phone call to a highly discreet, private logistics and moving team. They arrived precisely on time and worked with military efficiency. Over the course of exactly 3 hours, every single trace of my existence was surgically scrubbed from that penthouse. My clothes, my antique books, my favorite coffee mug, every photograph that featured my face, gone. I left the sprawling apartment immaculately clean and breathtakingly empty. I only left exactly one item behind. I left my custom-designed, $40,000 wedding dress. I draped it perfectly over a velvet tailor dummy, positioning it dead center in the cavernous, echoing living room. It stood there like a beautiful, terrifying ghost. My next move was purely digital, and it was infinitely more devastating. I sat down at my laptop, logged into my secure encrypted network, and completely severed the connection between my personal home server and the central mainframe at Thorne Studio. That specific server was my heavily guarded brainchild. It housed a highly complex structural simulation algorithm I had coded entirely from scratch. For 6 long years, that algorithm was the silent, invisible magic of the company. It automatically took Liam's flashy, aesthetically pleasing, but entirely mathematically impossible blueprints and quietly reworked the physics, adjusting load-bearing walls and tension ratios so his buildings would not actually collapse under their own weight. Without my code running in the background, Thorne Studio was essentially designing beautiful, multi-million-dollar death traps. I pulled the plug. There was no warning email, no system error message. I just left them in complete, blissful darkness. Then, I turned my attention to the parasites who had been feeding off my quiet generosity for years. I opened my private wealth management portal. It took exactly 3 clicks of my mouse to permanently revoke the unconditional financial guarantee I had signed for the luxury yacht loan belonging to Derek, Liam's notoriously lazy and entitled younger brother. I did not stop there. I instantly halted all automatic wire transfers that were paying the exorbitant monthly rent for Derek's Vanity Art Gallery in the downtown Arts District. Let us see exactly how much of a visionary artist Derek is when the landlord changes the locks and the electricity is shut off. With the dead weight finally cut loose, it was time to secure my own empire. I opened my email client and drafted a formal, legally binding acceptance letter. The offer was from Auradwell Innovations. They were an aggressive, highly funded, stealth mode future living development corporation that had been quietly sharpening their knives, aiming to completely obliterate Thorn Studios' market share. I officially accepted their offer for the position of Director of Structural Engineering. They needed a weapon to take over the city, and I was fully loaded and ready to fire. By sunset, I was comfortably seated in the first-class cabin of a one-way flight bound for Chicago. I held a crisp, ice-cold martini in my hand. As the heavy aircraft banked smoothly through the twilight sky, I looked down at the soft, rolling clouds below. I took a slow sip, a genuine, terrifying smile spreading across my face for the first time in months. Stripped of the protective genius facade I had so painstakingly constructed for him over the years, who was Liam Thorne really? He was about to find out, and the entire world was going to watch his destruction. While cruising at 35,000 feet above the American Midwest, I utilized the secure wireless network of the aircraft to initiate the final, irreversible phase of my digital purge. I was systematically wiping my administrative access trails from our shared cloud storage drives, meticulously severing the very last invisible threads that tied my personal life to his corporate infrastructure. It was intended to be a mundane, routine scrubbing. I was simply deleting old vacation itineraries to the Bahamas, shared grocery lists, and joint calendar invites. But as my script crawled through the back end, deep within the archived, seemingly forgotten subdirectories of the Horizon Tower Master Project, I noticed a glaring discrepancy. There was a single heavily encrypted folder buried underneath layers of outdated administrative files. Liam was fiercely arrogant, but he was inherently lazy with his cybersecurity protocols. He always operated under the delusion that his superficial charms and expensive suits could protect him from actual, rigorous scrutiny. He had used a standard 256-bit encryption, but he had tied the recovery key to a painfully obvious sequence. It took me exactly 14 minutes to crack the digital vault, utilizing a backdoor security bypass I had quietly built into the network structure years ago. The folder unzipped, revealing its hidden contents. I clicked open the primary master document, a massive 50-page portable document format file labeled Strictly Confidential. My eyes scanned the cover page, and for a fraction of a second, the air completely left my lungs. Staring back at me were the familiar intricate molecular diagrams, the stress resistance charts, and the thermodynamic equations of AeroCore. AeroCore was not just a lucrative side project, it was my late father's absolute life work. My father was a brilliant, obsessive materials scientist who had spent 2 decades trying to synthesize a revolutionary, self-healing, carbon-negative building material. When he passed away, I inherited his chaotic, brilliant notes. For the last 3 years, working grueling late nights in absolute secrecy while Liam slept soundly in the next room, I had painstakingly corrected my father's chemical equations, run the complex simulations, and finally perfected the physical material. It was my ultimate tribute to the man who raised me. It was a multi-billion-dollar breakthrough destined to change modern architecture forever. And yet, looking at the official federal patent submission displayed brightly on my laptop screen, my name was entirely absent. The document listed the primary sole inventor as Liam Thorne. The secondary inventor, holding a massive 49% equity stake in the patent, was listed as Elena Vance. A bitter, acidic taste flooded my mouth. Elena was Thorn Studios' lead interior designer, a woman whose greatest intellectual achievement was matching imported Italian throw pillows to velvet curtains. She was a woman who constantly, sickeningly referred to herself in press releases as Liam's ultimate creative muse. The sheer absurdity of her name sitting next to my father's complex thermodynamic equations was nauseating. The cruelty of the revelation hit me with the devastating force of a speeding freight train. Suddenly, all the disjointed puzzle pieces violently snapped together, forming a picture so calculating and ugly it made my hands shake. The sudden, frantic urgency to push the Aspen wedding back for the 5th time. The fake, exaggerated stress about supply chain issues. The endless late-night closed-door meetings with Elena that he swore were strictly about finalizing the lobby aesthetics of the Horizon Tower. Liam did not delay our wedding because he was overwhelmed with his architectural duties. He was deliberately and maliciously running down the clock. Under state law, any intellectual property finalized and registered before we officially signed a marriage license would remain his sole, legally protected asset. He was stalling. He was waiting for the Federal Patent Office to officially approve the AeroCore registry before letting me walk down the aisle. He was actively planning to steal my father's legacy, build an untouchable empire on my hidden genius, and ensure I had absolutely no legal right to any of the profits. The sorrow and the lingering sting of his betrayal vanished instantly, completely incinerated by a white-hot, absolute rage. For a brief, fleeting moment, I considered downloading the file and sending it directly to a team of ruthless corporate litigators in New York. I could sue both of them into total oblivion. I could freeze every single one of their bank accounts by Monday morning. But as I stared at the names Liam and Elena printed in bold, unyielding black ink, I realized that dragging them into a sterile, bureaucratic courtroom was far too gentle a punishment. A lawsuit would give them time to hire defense attorneys, to spin the media narrative, to quietly settle out of court while saving their public reputations. No. If they wanted to steal my wings and fly to the sun, I was going to let them reach the absolute highest, most terrifying altitude possible before I ripped those wings clean off. I opened my advanced coding terminal right there at 35,000 feet. I did not just leave them without the algorithm that kept their poorly designed buildings standing. I accessed the foundational architecture software still running deep within the Thorn Studio local intranet. My fingers flew furiously across the keyboard, writing a lethal, invisible, and highly sophisticated mathematical booby trap deep within the root code of the Horizon Tower project files. It was a phantom script. It would remain completely dormant, silently allowing them to render their flawless three-dimensional models, impress the board of directors, and secure their massive rounds of investment. But it was programmed with one very specific, inescapable trigger condition. The trap would only activate the exact second the Horizon Tower project was submitted to the central system for its final, mandatory municipal stress test and structural integrity inspection. I coded it to completely unravel their stolen empire at the exact moment they felt the most invincible. Ladies and gentlemen, observe the intersection of raw chaos and absolute serenity, Derek announced, waving his hand with practiced flair toward a blank canvas that carried a price tag of $20,000. Then, the lights died. The sudden, suffocating darkness was replaced by the harsh, flickering glow of emergency power. The building manager, a man who had tolerated Derek's incessant, entitled demands for 2 years, walked in with a look of bored indifference. He did not care about the art. He cared about the 6 months of unpaid rent that had suddenly gone into arrears. "This is an absolute outrage. Do you have any idea who I am?" Derek shrieked, his voice cracking with panic as he realized the manager was not joking. "I know exactly who you are, Mr. Thorne. You are the man whose primary financial guarantor just pulled the plug. Your account is empty, your credit line is terminated, and this lease is void. Clear your canvases by 5 o'clock today, or they end up in the dumpster." Derek fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so violently he nearly dropped it. He dialed his brother. Liam was in the middle of explaining the revenue projections for the Horizon Tower to a room full of skeptical investors. He was mid-sentence when his phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. The investors looked at each other, murmuring. Liam excused himself and stepped into the hallway, his face turning an angry shade of red. "Derek, what is so important that you are interrupting my board meeting?" "Liam, you idiot. The gallery. They are kicking me out. The account is frozen. What did you do?" "What do you mean, frozen? I did not touch your accounts," Liam snapped, his voice tight with irritation. He walked back inside, but the silence in the room felt heavy and judgmental. Meanwhile, at Thorne's studio, the atmosphere was thick with frantic energy. The head engineer, Sarah, was staring at her primary monitor with her mouth agape. The structural simulation model for the main spire of the Horizon Tower was turning bright red, indicating catastrophic failure across every single floor. "Liam, we have a massive problem," Sarah shouted the moment he hung up the phone. "The software is reporting structural instability across the entire load-bearing frame. The building is basically a house of cards. We tried to rerun the simulation to isolate the variable, but the core algorithm is gone. It just evaporated. The entire central database for our physics engine has been wiped clean." Liam scoffed, waving her off with a dismissive hand. "It is probably just a server glitch. Call Quinn. She is clearly just throwing a temper tantrum because I postponed the wedding again. She probably locked the admin rights to get a rise out of me." He dialed my number, his voice dripping with his signature, condescending authority. "Quinn, stop this nonsense immediately. I do not have time to play these childish games while I am trying to build an empire. Log back into the server and fix the bugs you created before the board meeting falls apart. You are acting like a petulant child." He paused, waiting for my apology. He expected me to cave, to fix his mess, and to soothe his ego just like I had done for years. I read his incoming call notification while sitting in a sleek, minimalist office in Chicago. I did not pick up. Instead, I sent a single text message. "The card is locked. The algorithm is deleted. Enjoy playing with your muse." Then, I blocked his number permanently and powered down my personal device. I set the phone down and looked out at the Chicago skyline. Here, at Aura Dwell Innovations, there were no tantrums, no parasites, and no ego-driven architecture. I stood up, walked into the main design lab, and greeted my new team. "Today we begin the Nexus project," I announced to the room of brilliant engineers. "And we are going to make the Horizon Tower look like a primitive, crumbling pile of sticks." The panic in Boston was a thick, suffocating fog. But Liam was nothing if not a master illusionist. Without my algorithm silently fixing the collapsing digital models of the Horizon Tower, the project was bleeding investor confidence by the hour. The engineering team was completely paralyzed, staring at screens filled with fatal error codes they could not comprehend. To stop the financial hemorrhaging and distract the anxious board of directors, Liam played his stolen trump card prematurely. He bypassed the standard, rigorous testing phases and pushed Elena Vance directly into the blinding spotlight of the national media, branding her and the stolen AeroCore material as the miraculous saviors of modern architecture. She landed the cover of Architectural Digest just 2 weeks later. The glossy, high-definition spread was entirely nauseating. There she sat in the grand lobby of Thorne's studio, draped in a bespoke silk gown, her neck adorned with a blinding cascade of flawless diamonds. It was the exact same $250,000 Cartier necklace Liam had once looked me in the eye and sworn was far too ostentatious and financially irresponsible for an architect's wife to wear. In the featured interview, she smiled a vapid, practiced smile and spun an elaborate, sickening fairy tale for the reporter. "Liam and I spent countless, grueling nights in the laboratory," Elena declared in the article, her words a poisonous theft of my actual sleepless years of labor. "We poured our souls into synthesizing AeroCore. It is the perfect union of his structural vision and my intuitive grasp of elemental harmony. We are not just building a tower, We are redefining the very fabric of urban living. But the grand illusion began to fray almost immediately when subjected to actual scientific scrutiny. During a live primetime broadcast on a major financial news network, a seasoned, ruthless anchor pivoted away from the softball questions about interior aesthetics and asked Elena to explain the carbon sequestration ratio of the revolutionary material she claimed to have invented. "So, Ms. Vance, regarding the thermal dynamics of AeroCore," the anchor pressed, leaning forward with a piercing gaze, "how exactly does the polymer matrix maintain its structural integrity at extreme temperatures exceeding 400 degrees Fahrenheit?" Elena froze on live television. The confident, radiant muse vanished in a fraction of a second, replaced by a deer caught in the headlights of a massive, oncoming truck. She blinked rapidly, stammering through a chaotic word salad of meaningless design buzzwords. "Well, you see, the integrity it is deeply connected to the holistic synergy of the microstructures. We focused heavily on the, organic fluidity of the components to ensure maximum, spatial endurance and aesthetic flow. In private boardrooms and luxury penthouses across the city, you could practically hear the collective sound of multi-million-dollar checkbooks snapping shut. Elite investors are ruthless, and they can smell intellectual incompetence from a mile away." A quiet financial panic was brewing, but Liam, blinded by his own frantic need to launch the project and secure his legacy, aggressively ignored the warning signs. He doubled down, pouring more money into marketing the upcoming unveiling ceremony. While they scrambled desperately to patch the massive holes in their sinking ship, I sat in the quiet, perfectly climate-controlled sanctuary of my Chicago office, meticulously greasing the tracks for their final, spectacular derailment. Using an untraceable, heavily encrypted proxy server routed through a dozen different countries, I compiled a highly detailed, anonymous technical dossier. It contained just enough fragmented, highly classified data regarding the thermodynamic instabilities of the stolen AeroCore formula to raise massive, undeniable red flags. I routed this dossier directly to the senior investigative directors of the National Structural Certification Board, along with a polite, anonymous invitation urging them to attend the highly anticipated public unveiling of the Horizon Tower. If you are going to expose a massive fraud, you must ensure the federal executioners are sitting in the very front row. Meanwhile, Aura Dwell Innovations struck its first public match. We released a highly produced 30-second teaser trailer for Project Nexus. The video showed no faces and named no architects. It only displayed a sweeping, breathtaking holographic render of a hyper-advanced, self-sustaining skyscraper that defied every known limitation of modern structural engineering. It was a masterpiece of architectural tension, promising absolute safety, zero carbon emissions, and a completely revolutionary aesthetic. My former loyal colleagues in Boston later told me that Liam watched the Nexus teaser on the massive flat screen in his glass-walled office and actually laughed out loud. "It is just a theoretical pipe dream," Liam had sneered to his panicked board of directors, waving his hand dismissively at the screen. "Aura Dwell is bluffing. Nobody has the mathematical capability to support a cantilevered load like that. Not even us. Focus entirely on the Horizon launch. We are going to bury them." His arrogance was his ultimate fatal blind spot. He was so utterly consumed by his own inflated sense of superiority that he failed to recognize the distinct, meticulous geometric signature of the Nexus design. He did not realize he was staring directly at the very genius he had taken for granted and exploited for 6 long years. Everything was now perfectly aligned. The heavy iron dominoes were stacked in a flawless, inescapable sequence. Liam had his stolen, fraudulent patent, Elena had her unearned, crumbling spotlight, and the strict federal inspectors were polishing their clipboards and packing their bags for Boston. The invisible trap was fully set, the safety was off, and I was simply sitting back, waiting for Liam Thorne to walk up to the podium and pull the trigger himself. The Grand Exhibition Hall of the Boston Convention Center was bathed in a dramatic, icy blue light, transformed for the evening into a sprawling cathedral dedicated to modern architectural worship. Over 1,000 of the wealthiest, most influential individuals on the eastern seaboard had gathered under the soaring ceilings. Venture capitalists, real estate tycoons, and elite city officials mingled, clutching flutes of expensive vintage champagne. Sitting directly in the front row, holding digital clipboards and wearing expressions of absolute, unyielding scrutiny, were the senior investigative directors from the National Structural Certification Board. The air in the massive room practically hummed with the electric anticipation of a historic technological revolution. Hundreds of miles away, sitting comfortably in the leather chair of my dimly lit corner office in Chicago, I watched the entire spectacle unfold on a massive, wall-mounted high-definition monitor. I had poured myself a single glass of neat whiskey, leaning back to watch the live broadcast. The trap I had so carefully laid was primed, and the prey was eagerly walking directly into the snare, completely blinded by the blinding flashes of the press cameras. The orchestral background music swelled to a triumphant crescendo as Liam Thorne finally stepped out onto the magnificent stage. He looked like a king surveying his newly conquered kingdom. He wore a perfectly tailored midnight blue tuxedo, his hair effortlessly styled, flashing his signature, dangerously charming smile to the adoring crowd. Standing slightly behind him to his right was Elena Vance, draped in an emerald green designer gown, the stolen Cartier diamonds glittering violently under the harsh stage lights. She posed for the cameras, playing the role of the visionary muse to absolute perfection. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and members of the board," Liam began, his deep, resonant voice echoing through the state-of-the-art surround sound speakers. "Tonight, we do not just unveil a building. We unveil the absolute pinnacle of human ingenuity. For years, the limitations of standard physics have chained our imaginations to the ground. But with the groundbreaking invention of our proprietary AeroCore material, we have shattered those chains entirely." The crowd erupted into a wave of enthusiastic applause. Liam raised his hands, humbly soaking in the unearned worship. He then turned his body gracefully toward the center of the stage, where a colossal, 60-foot-high holographic projection system sat waiting in the darkness. Before we break ground on this historic $2 billion project, the city of Boston requires a public demonstration of absolute safety. Tonight, we will run the Horizon Tower through a live, unedited, virtual reality stress test. We will subject this magnificent structure to a simulated Category 5 hurricane, featuring sustained wind speeds exceeding 160 miles per hour. Prepare to witness a miracle. Liam reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a sleek remote control, and confidently pressed the primary ignition button. The colossal screens ignited with a blinding, pristine white light. A flawless, incredibly detailed, three-dimensional holographic model of the Horizon Tower materialized in the center of the stage. It was undeniably beautiful, a twisting, gravity-defying spire of glass and steel that looked like a silver needle piercing the virtual sky. The simulation initiated. The massive speakers blasted the deafening, terrifying roar of simulated hurricane winds. Virtual rain lashed violently against the holographic glass. The crowd leaned forward collectively, their breath caught in their throats, expecting the tower to stand firm and resolute against the apocalyptic digital storm. But they were not about to see a miracle. They were about to see reality. At that exact, predetermined microsecond, the hidden mathematical trap I had buried deep inside the software architecture finally woke up. My phantom script did not inject a malicious virus into the Thorne Studio network. It did not randomly delete vital files or scramble the visual data. The trap was infinitely more elegant and far more devastating. It simply executed a single absolute command. It instantly deactivated the invisible protective algorithm I had written 6 years ago. It stripped away the magical scaffolding that had always secretly compensated for Liam's catastrophic design flaws. In the blink of an eye, the simulation software stopped fixing his mistakes and simply applied the actual unforgiving laws of real-world physics to the stolen AeroCore formula and his arrogant blueprints. On the massive 60-foot screen, the magnificent illusion began to die. It started with a sharp, agonizing synthetic crack that echoed like a gunshot through the convention center. The crowd gasped in unison. Near the middle section of the holographic tower, a massive web of deep red microfractures spiderwebbed violently across the load-bearing support beams. The synthetic wind howled, and without my algorithm constantly adjusting the invisible tension ratios, the structure could not bear its own impossible twisted weight. "Wait, what is happening to the render?" a terrified investor shouted from the second row. Liam tapped the remote control frantically, the blood rapidly draining from his perfectly tanned face. "It is just a slight rendering glitch," he stammered into the microphone, his voice trembling entirely. "Our technicians are rebooting the visual matrix right now." It was not a glitch. The collapse accelerated with terrifying, visceral realism. A massive section of the eastern facade suddenly blew outward, showering the virtual streets below with millions of jagged shards of digital glass. The internal titanium skeleton of the building groaned, twisting violently under the extreme wind pressure. The entire upper half of the tower began to lean horribly to the left. The foundation snapped. With a deafening, thunderous roar that shook the very floorboards of the convention center, the entire billion-dollar Horizon Tower completely imploded on the screen, folding in on itself and crashing down into a chaotic, tragic pile of simulated rubble and ash. Absolute, suffocating silence fell over the massive exhibition hall. 1,000 people sat paralyzed, staring in wide-eyed horror at the wreckage of their investments. Then came the final, killing blow. The smoke on the massive screen slowly cleared, and the twisted wreckage faded into a solid, pitch-black background. A single, enormous error message flashed onto the screen in bright, glowing, blood-red letters, towering over Liam. The automated system voice read the message aloud, echoing mercilessly through the cavernous room. "Critical system failure. Warning. The AeroCore material at current applied ratios violently violates the fundamental laws of thermodynamics and structural physics. Catastrophic collapse is absolutely inevitable. Please contact the original creator and lead engineer for immediate algorithm calibration. Quinn Brooks." The silence shattered into absolute pandemonium. The reporters in the press pit surged forward like a pack of starving wolves, their camera flashes exploding in a blinding, chaotic strobe light effect. "Liam, is the entire patent a fraud?" a journalist screamed over the deafening noise. "Who is Quinn Brooks?" another yelled. The investors leaped out of their seats, their faces twisted in pure, unadulterated fury. A prominent hedge fund manager stormed right up to the edge of the stage, his face purple with rage. "You lied to us, you arrogant fraud. I want my $50 million returned to my accounts by tomorrow morning, or I will have you thrown in federal prison." The agents from the National Structural Certification Board immediately stood up, pulling out their phones to call federal authorities, already treating the stage as an active crime scene. In the center of the spiraling chaos, Elena Vance completely shattered. A ruthless investigative reporter shoved a microphone directly into her face. "Ms. Vance, you claim to have invented this material. Explain the thermal load failure. Explain the molecular binding failure right now." Elena let out a high-pitched, terrified sob. She grabbed the heavy skirts of her emerald gown, turned her back on Liam, and literally sprinted off the side of the stage, fleeing blindly into the dark backstage corridors as the flashes chased her retreating figure. Liam Thorne did not run. He could not. He stood absolutely frozen in the dead center of the stage, his arms hanging limply by his sides. His expensive remote control slipped from his trembling fingers, shattering on the hard wooden floor. A thick layer of cold sweat beaded heavily on his forehead, ruining his perfect hair. The deafening screams of the investors, the blinding lights of the press, and the looming threat of the federal agents swirled around him in a terrifying vortex. He slowly looked up at the massive red letters spelling my name across the screen. In that excruciating, inescapable moment of public annihilation, stripped of the genius he had stolen and the woman who had quietly built his throne, Liam Thorne finally understood the horrific truth. He was not a king. He was not a visionary. He was nothing but an empty, fragile shell, and I had just crushed him to dust. While the news networks were still frantically broadcasting the chaotic ruins of Liam's career in Boston, a massive, coordinated press release erupted across every major financial and architectural channel from Chicago. Oradwell Innovations officially launched the Nexus project to the world. I stepped onto the gleaming marble podium of our press room. I wore a sharply tailored charcoal gray power suit. My left hand gripped the edges of the podium, completely bare, completely free of any diamond engagement ring. I introduced myself to the absolute shock of the architectural world as the chief architect of Nexus and the true sole creator of the Aero core material. To silence any lingering doubt, my engineering team projected an undeniable, immutable blockchain ledger onto the massive screen behind me. It permanently time-stamped every single chemical equation, every late-night thermodynamic simulation, and every stress test I had coded, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that I had authored the entire patent 5 years prior. The fallout was absolute and breathtakingly swift. By the very next morning, agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation raided the Boston offices of Thorne's studio. They carried out dozens of heavy boxes of physical evidence and seized every single hard drive in the building. Liam was formally indicted for massive intellectual property fraud and the malicious forgery of federal building safety records. His hollow empire collapsed entirely under the crushing weight of hundreds of millions of dollars in immediate debt and aggressive investor lawsuits. Elena Vance did exactly what parasites do best when the ship starts sinking. She tried to attach herself to a new host. She immediately posted a tearful, highly edited video on her social media, sobbing uncontrollably and claiming she was completely manipulated by a narcissistic Liam. The federal prosecutors did not care about her performance. They charged her as a willing co-conspirator, leaving both of them facing up to 20 years in federal prison. As for Derek, without my silent monthly financial injections, reality hit him like a concrete wall. He was quickly evicted from his luxury loft. The last I heard, the man who used to call himself a visionary artist was now bussing tables and pouring tap water for minimum wage at a mediocre late-night diner on the outskirts of the city. 2 weeks later, Liam appeared in the expansive, sunlit lobby of the Oradwell headquarters in Chicago. He looked absolutely destroyed. His expensive tailored suit was hopelessly wrinkled. His hair was a chaotic mess, and the arrogant, blinding smile was completely gone, replaced by the dark, heavy bags of absolute defeat under his bloodshot eyes. When I walked through the security gates, he literally dropped to his knees right there on the polished granite floor in front of dozens of my employees. "Quinn, please," he begged, his voice cracking horribly. "Please save me. I was just so overwhelmed by the immense pressure of the investors. I only postponed the wedding because I wanted to secure our future before we settled down. I still love you, Quinn. I have always loved you." I stopped walking. I did not feel pity. I did not feel anger. I felt absolutely nothing. I looked down at him from my high heels, my voice as cold and sharp as a razor blade. "You postponed the wedding 5 times to build a towering empire on my back. The 6th time, I simply decided I was not going to postpone my life anymore. I just stepped aside and let you bear the absolute weight of your own arrogance." I did not wait for a response. I stepped cleanly around him, walked directly into my private, glass-walled elevator, and pressed the button for the highest floor. As the doors slid shut, I watched his broken figure shrink into the distance, while I ascended toward the absolute summit of the empire I truly deserved. To all the amazing listeners of Violet Revenge Stories, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to my journey today. I would love to know, where in the world are you listening from right now? Please let me know down in the comments. If you found today's story entertaining and satisfying, please consider helping our channel with just a $1 donation. You can do this easily by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by using the PayPal link located in the video description or the comment section. Your $1 helps us pay our hardworking staff so they can feed their families and continue creating even better, more thrilling stories to serve you. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.